Hi everyone. My talk today is about developer experience for internal teams. Before I get started, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Ian Sutherland. I'm an engineering lead and the DX team lead at Neo Financial. I'm also one of the maintainers of Create React App and a member of the node.js team, where I mostly work on the tooling working group. You can find me online at Twitter and GitHub at Ian Su. So what is developer experience? Well, it's similar to other experience type acronyms you've probably heard before: user experience or UX, customer experience or CX. And really it asks the question, what is the experience like when working with your developer products and tools? When people talk about good DX, there are some common companies whose names come up. Stripe is one example. Developers really like integrating with Stripe because they have great APIs and SDKs for working with those APIs. They also have great documentation and a sandbox environment where you can test your payments code end to end. GitHub is another company that comes to mind for me. GitHub Actions let you do some really cool stuff just by composing a bunch of smaller pieces. It's kind of like Lego for CI. The new GitHub CLI is really great. The new web-based version of VS Code is great. You can, from any GitHub repo, you can press one key and you've got a full-fledged version of VS Code running in your browser, and you can edit the code and make changes. And then Codespaces takes that to the next level. You can launch a virtual machine in the cloud from any repo and start working on it. There are also some companies whose names come up in the context of bad DX. I won't name any names, but you've probably worked with some of them before, and you're probably not that eager to work with them again. It's also possible that you might not be that eager to go work for a company with a reputation like that. So DX is really important. So how does DX apply to your team? Well, I'm going to tell you how it applies to my team at Neo, and hopefully that will give you some ideas. First, I should give some context about what Neo does. Neo is a Canadian fintech startup that makes consumer banking products. So for example, we have a rewards credit card, a high interest savings account, all the various ways you'd expect to be able to move money in and out of those accounts. All of this is accessible through our iOS and Android apps, as well as our web app. Now you might notice that I didn't mention any developer products, APIs, SDKs, anything like that. Why is that? Well, we have no developer products or external developers. So then why do we need a DX team? Well, what we do have is around 100 full-time developers across multiple teams. It's important that these developers have a good day-to-day experience working on our product and platform. A good developer experience gets you into this kind of flow. You've probably experienced this before. You're able to build something and see results quickly, which makes you happy. That energy drives you to build more, and the cycle continues. This is what sometimes makes learning a new language or framework so much fun. And this should be what you want for your team. When this isn't the case, developers are unhappy and frustrated, and that can lead to them leaving the company. I saw this tweet from Charity Majors a while ago. She's replying to this person that's saying builds went from 40 minutes to 4 hours at their work, and they started job hunting. I can't say that I blame them. I probably would have been looking at the 40-minute mark. And anyway, she replies to this person and says, people really do leave their jobs over build times. I am not making this up. The impact your deploy pipeline has on developer productivity and happiness is hardcore. And of course, the deploy pipeline is only one aspect of the developer experience. So we don't want people on our team to be unhappy, especially if they're so unhappy that they start looking for a new job, because hiring is hard. You can increase your team's capacity by hiring more developers, or by increasing the productivity of the developers you already have. Hiring and onboarding are expensive and take time. With a team of 100 people, saving everyone 5 minutes a day is the equivalent of hiring another full-time person. Sean Wang puts it another way in this tweet. He says, the ratio of internal tooling or developer productivity engineers to others is too low in most companies. If you have 50 devs and have room to improve productivity at least 1% a quarter, you have budget for 1 to 2 dedicated DX engineers. And for a little bit of context, our DX team at Neo is made up of myself and 4 other developers. So we're right around this mark. So when should you start? Big companies all have internal teams that focus on DX and productivity and tooling. We know that they do because we often see new frameworks and languages coming from this work. Some examples are Kubernetes, Go, React, Jest. These were all tools that were created internally to improve the developer experience and productivity, and eventually were made open source and shared with the world. So when should your company start thinking about DX? Well, it's never too early. This usually starts early on in an informal kind of way. People make scripts to automate certain tasks. We're developers, that's what we do. Maybe a collection of those scripts ends up in a Git repo. People also make notes about how to do certain things like testing, deploying, creating new services or libraries, and maybe they keep those notes to themselves. Maybe those also end up in a shared Git repo. But I would say turn that collection of scripts into a CLI. It becomes a way to share and distribute that code. And it gives people a place to contribute new things. And it makes your team's work easier and your own. Turn those notes into a wiki. Becomes a shared knowledge base, gives people a place to share and contribute, maintain some of your shared history and documents past decisions. And this is really especially helpful for onboarding new team members. So I'm going to talk more about the kinds of things you can build to help your team. But first, I want to talk about challenges engineering teams face. So working locally is one challenge. Pulling code from multiple different repos, running a collection of microservices to test changes, building and testing change services, connecting to shared resources in the cloud, getting good data to test with. These are all challenges of working locally. Continuous integration and deployment is another one. Having build and test run on pull requests, deploying changes to an integration or staging environment, especially if you're working with multiple microservices, orchestrating all of that can be a lot of work. Deploying changes to production. Code quality and consistency is another common challenge. Maintaining common configuration and settings between projects, ensuring code conforms with patterns and practices, maintaining a high level of test coverage, doing code reviews effectively, making sure the right people are looking at things, distributing them across your team. Those are all challenges. Security and compliance is another big one. Keeping dependencies up to date, automated code scanning for bad patterns and vulnerabilities, ensuring proper checks and sign-offs on pull requests. Those are just a few of the security and compliance challenges teams face. And onboarding is another big challenge. Minimizing the time needed for people to ramp up, making it easy to do the right thing, removing any rough edges or opportunities to make mistakes. These are all things that will help new people get up to speed and start contributing as soon as possible. So let's talk about some of the things in your DX toolkit. First off is custom tools. And CLI apps are one type of tool you can build. We have a custom CLI at Neo. It's very cleverly named the Neo CLI. We use it to do things like pull code from multiple repos, run subsets of microservices locally, identify bad local configurations that could be causing errors. Can even be used to restart and roll back services, or for smaller things like bringing up the README or changelog for a project or finding out who the code owner is. Those are just some of the things that we use it for. Desktop apps are another type of tool. Not everyone is comfortable with CLI apps. And the nice thing these days is that desktop apps can be built with Electron using web technologies, which is probably something that you or your team has experience with. This isn't something that we've done yet at Neo, but it's definitely on our list. Web apps are another type of tool. Again, there's a good chance you and your team are pretty comfortable building web apps. Some examples of web apps we've built at Neo. One is the build monitor. So we use this to watch code changes as they move through GitHub and various deploy pipelines in various cloud environments. We built another web app to collect code coverage metrics, and another one to simulate various kinds of transactions in our testing environments. GitHub Actions. I mentioned this before. I'm a big fan. We use a number of third-party actions at Neo. We've also built a number of our own and open sourced them. For example, we have one that checks pull requests for ticket numbers for compliance purposes. We have another one that checks GraphQL schema changes to make sure there are no breaking changes. Another one that squashes and signs commits that come from our language translation service. That's just a few examples. And then we also have Slack bots. So we have a custom Slack bot called NeoBot. In some ways similar to the Neo CLI, but it runs in Slack. You can ask it questions about who's on what team or what team owns a certain library or service. And it can also deploy branches to our integration environments or tell you what branch any given service is running in those environments. Those are just a few examples. And it's not just about tools. Other resources are very important for developer experience. Documentation is one of the most important things you can provide to developers. This could be a wiki or other knowledge base, or it could be project readmes and diagrams. All of these things are super valuable. Videos is another type of resource. This can be short video tutorials or walkthroughs about how to troubleshoot common errors or how to use certain tools to enhance your workflow. Sometimes a video does a better job than a document or a README at demonstrating how to do something. Talks are another great way to share knowledge. They can be more formal or informal, like a lunch and learn. We try to do 2 of these sessions every week at Neo. We record all of these talks and archive them in our wiki, and this is really helpful for referring back to a talk and for onboarding new developers. And then there's training. This can be more formal training sessions, either with new hires or to teach existing employees new skills. These can be done internally by your own team, or you can bring in experts from outside your company to speak to your team on certain topics. Developer relations. Companies with developer products usually have people whose job is to engage with developers using their platform to tell them about new features, help them with issues, and gather feedback. And sometimes this can happen through conference talks, live streams, or podcasts, but a lot of the time it happens through Twitter or a discussion on a GitHub issue or pull request. And this is part of your DX team's job too. So feedback. Actively encourage feedback from your team on the tools and resources that your team maintains and makes available to them. Support. Answer questions and help people troubleshoot issues. If there's a bug, ticket it and make sure it gets resolved. And I think most importantly is to listen. People don't always give direct feedback. Sometimes you have to listen to what people are saying in Slack or around the office. I personally like to set up keywords in Slack for anything related to my team's tools or our CI/CD environment, testing, anything else that my team is responsible for. And then if someone mentions an issue on Slack, I get a notification and I can pop in there and try and help them. And this goes a long way towards building trust with your team. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about some of the best practices for your DX team. So first of all, don't do it alone. Your team is probably relatively small and has limited resources. This is especially true when you don't have a full-time team. If you think back to Sean's tweet, then you're probably not going to have a full-time DX team until you have at least 25 developers. So chances are you've got limited resources. So you want to encourage contributions from team members outside of your DX team and make it as easy as possible for them to contribute. Your role there is to facilitate and provide whatever help you can to those developers. Treat tools like production software. If something is broken, then productivity and happiness are going to suffer. If things are frequently broken, people will stop using them and find another way to do their work. And once you lose those users, it's very hard to win them back. Think of your teammates as your customers. Metrics and analytics. Guide your future work based on which features and tools people actually use. Again, you probably have pretty limited resources, so focus on the most important and high impact things. Metrics aren't just for web apps. You can add metrics to CLIs, Slack bots, and other tools. This is actually something that we did recently. We now collect metrics on how often NeoCLI and NeoBot commands are being used, as well as metrics on error rates, and how often people are seeing the help text for those commands. So for example, if someone gets the options to a command wrong and the help text is displayed, we track that. If that's happening all the time with a certain command, then we know that command is not intuitive to use, and that's something we need to fix. And all of these metrics feed into Datadog, and then we have a custom dashboard that our team can monitor to look for these kinds of problems. Error reporting and logging. Know when something goes wrong. That's a teammate trying to do their job and having a problem with one of your tools. That's an opportunity for your team to jump in there and help them. You don't want users to be the ones telling you something is broken. You want to be proactive and get out ahead of those things. Solicit feedback. Ask teammates to give you feedback and make it clear how to do so. This doesn't always work. People don't always report issues or make suggestions, but you should still ask. When errors occur, show a message reminding the person how to give feedback or ask for help. It can be as simple as directing them to a Slack channel or an email address. Ask them what you want them to report, the command they tried running, the error that they got. And then, of course, monitor Slack for keywords related to your tools, because people aren't always going to reach out to you. Publicize new features. When you release a new version of a tool, let people know. Tell them about new features and how they can improve their workflow or make their lives easier. And shout out contributors from outside your team. Recognize people's efforts and encourage new contributions. That's someone that's gone above and beyond to contribute to one of your team's shared tools. And so you should recognize that and appreciate that. Documentation. Make sure your tools have great documentation. READMEs and wiki pages should have detailed instructions and be up to date. Record video tutorials with tips and tricks for different workflows. Do talks or training sessions on how to effectively use the tools that your team provides, and record those too. Automatic updates. Makes it easy for everyone to have your latest and greatest. Users expect this from the rest of their tools, and the tools you're putting out there should be no different. This is, of course, easy with web apps, harder with other types of tools, but I think worth the effort. With a desktop app, you can pop up a message letting them know an update is available, and then make it a one-click install and relaunch kind of upgrade. With CLI apps, you can at least display a message after the user runs a command telling them there's a new version available. Ideally, you can give them the command they need to run to upgrade to that new version. And finally, make tools fun. Everything doesn't always have to be serious. Add a little humor to the output and error messages. Use emoji or ASCII art or whatever. Give your tools and bots a little personality. Everyone could use a laugh now and then, and maybe it can make a bad experience a little less bad. Now, of course, use this sparingly, and you always want to have a way to disable or opt out of this. Sometimes people really do just want to focus and get some work done. So let's quickly summarize what we've covered today. DX for internal teams. It's never too early to start. Establish places for people to contribute and consolidate their efforts. Don't do it alone. Work with your teammates and encourage contributions. It's not just tools, documentation and other resources, talks and learning sessions, developer relations. All of these things are just as important as the tools your team builds. Treat internal tools like production software. And finally, have a little fun with it. That's it. Thanks for watching. I'm in Vancouver for the conference, so please come say hi or join my channel on the conference Discord server. You can also get in touch with me through Twitter @IanSue. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
All right, and thank you, Ian. That was, I think all of us can relate to a number of the things you talk about. Even when I wasn't a developer, I was writing tools just to make my editorial tasks easier. Now, one of the things you talk about internally developed tools. Should you always build your own tools, or are there, packages you can buy that you recommend?
Yeah, I would say you probably don't want to always be building something custom. Certainly, if there is an existing tool out there that does exactly what you need it to do and is, reasonably affordable, then probably you should use that. But when you're talking about custom like CI workflows or build processes and things like that, it's pretty hard to find third-party tools that work just the way you want. So those are the situations I think where I would suggest just building something custom.
Okay. Now, I've been at companies where there's a wiki, there's Confluence, an internal Git, Jira, another ticketing system, team file shares. At what point, how do you make all this information more discoverable for your developers?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a tough one when information is sort of fragmented across systems like that. That is some of what we try to do with our internal tools, is to bridge some of those systems, bring them together into maybe like a unified kind of dashboard. That's one way that you could potentially make it a little bit easier to traverse that kind of information.
All right. So that's about all the time we have for questions. I am going to hand it off now to Jacques Favreau, who's going to talk to us about a Tolkien-esque Fellowship of the String. Thank you. Thanks again, Ian.